There is a unique stillness that falls over the world in the deepest hours of the night. A profound quiet that feels ancient and watchful. Most of us are asleep, cocooned in the fragile safety of our dreams. But for some, these pre-dawn hours are when the world feels most awake. When the veil that separates our reality from something else grows thin and porous. Halloween night, of course, is a time dedicated to that thinning veil. A night when we collectively lean into the shadows, telling stories of ghosts and ghouls, celebrating the macabre with a nervous smile. We dress up as monsters, pretending for a moment to be the things we fear. But what happens when the games end? When the last of the trick-or-treaters have gone home and the world outside your window sinks into that profound, watchful quiet. Folklore, and a startling number of modern accounts, point to one specific hour when this veil is at its most vulnerable. Not midnight, as many believe, but 3 in the morning. Often called the witching hour or the devil's hour, it's a time believed to be a mockery of the Holy Trinity, a moment when demonic and paranormal activity is said to peak. So, the question we must ask ourselves is a chilling one. What happens when the most paranormally charged night of the year meets its most paranormally charged hour? Tonight, we're not just telling ghost stories. We're exploring what happens when people find themselves awake at 3 a.m. on Halloween. Our first story is not one you will find in old history books or paranormal case files. It is a story that feels more personal, more intimate, pieced together from countless similar experiences shared in hushed tones online and around late-night campfires. It is the kind of story that could happen to anyone, which is precisely what makes it so terrifying. Imagine a small group of friends, barely out of their teens, spending Halloween night in an old family cabin, deep in the woods. The party is over. The excitement of the evening has faded into a comfortable quiet. They talk, they laugh, sharing scary stories to pass the time as a storm rages outside. The power flickers, then dies, plunging them into the flickering, dancing light of a few candles. It's perfect spooky season ambience. Around 2 a.m., things begin to change. A floorboard creaks in the hallway upstairs where no one is. They dismiss it as the old house settling. A cold draft snakes through the room, extinguishing one of the candles, even though the windows are sealed tight against the storm. An uneasy silence falls over the group. The laughter stops. The stories no longer feel like fun. One of them, a young woman named Clara, feels a sudden, overwhelming sense of being watched. It's a primal, prickling sensation on the back of her neck that she cannot shake. Her friends notice her discomfort, but they try to reason it away. It's the dark, the storm, the ghost stories. They're just scaring themselves. But the feeling only intensifies. A soft scratching sound begins at the main door, a rhythmic, deliberate scrape that is almost lost beneath the sound of the wind and rain. It's not an animal. It sounds methodical. They sit frozen, listening, eyes wide in the candlelight. One of them finally picks up his phone to use its flashlight, and in doing so, illuminates the time. It is 2:57 a.m. As the clock on the phone ticks over to 3, the scratching stops. The silence that follows is somehow worse, heavier, charged with an impossible tension. And then, from the hallway upstairs, comes a new sound. The slow, methodical creak of a single footstep, then another, and another. Something is walking, deliberately, across the length of the upstairs hall. It is a heavy tread, not the light footfall of a spirit, but something that sounds solid. Present. They are paralyzed by a fear so pure it feels like ice in their veins. No one speaks, no one moves. They just listen as the footsteps stop directly above them. And the entire cabin is filled with a low guttural whisper that seems to come from everywhere at once. It's a language they don't understand, yet the meaning is terrifyingly clear. It is ancient, it is angry, and it knows they are there. Just as suddenly as it began, it ends. The presence vanishes. The oppressive weight in the room lifts. A few minutes later, the first rays of dawn begin to break through the clouds, and the power flickers back on. The night is over. But for Clara and her friends, the world would never quite feel the same again. They never spoke of what they heard, but the memory of that shared terror, in that specific hour, bound them in a silence that would last a lifetime. A personal experience, shared between friends, can be explained away. The mind plays tricks in the dark, and fear is a powerful catalyst for the imagination. It's easy to dismiss footsteps and whispers as the product of a storm and an overactive mind. But it becomes much harder to dismiss when the phenomena are not just heard, but seen and felt. When they are not just fleeting, but relentless. When an encounter at the witching hour isn't a one-time event, but a nightly, terrifying ritual from which there is no escape. Perhaps no case in modern history better exemplifies this horrifying consistency than the infamous haunting of 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The story is well known, but the detail that often gets lost in the sensationalism is the one that speaks directly to the power of a specific, malevolent hour. In December of 1975, the Lutz family moved into their dream home, a beautiful Dutch colonial they had purchased for a shockingly low price. They knew, of course, of the horrific event that had taken place there just 13 months prior, when Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family as they slept in their beds. But they believed they could build a new, happy life within those walls. They were wrong. The haunting began almost immediately. Strange odors, swarms of flies in the dead of winter, cold spots that chilled them to the bone. But for the father, George Lutz, the torment took on a terrifyingly specific pattern. Every single morning, he would wake up abruptly, jolted from his sleep. He would be drenched in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, filled with a sense of inexplicable dread. When he looked at the clock, it was always the same time, 3:15 a.m., the approximate time the DeFeo murders had been committed. This was not a gentle awakening. It was a violent intrusion. It was as if an alarm clock of pure evil was going off inside his soul. Often, this nightly ritual was accompanied by other phenomena. He would hear the front door slam, though it was locked and bolted. He would hear what sounded like a full brass band marching through the living room. On one occasion, his wife Kathy levitated several inches off the bed as she slept. The 3:15 witching hour became the anchor for the house's malevolence. It was the time the entity, or entities within the home, seemed to be at their strongest. It was a daily, psychological assault on George, a reminder of the tragedy that stained the property and a promise of the violence that might come again. The nightly torment wore him down, transforming him from a loving family man into a sullen, angry stranger. After just 28 days, the Lutz family fled the house, leaving all of their possessions behind. They never returned. Their story has been debated and scrutinized for decades, but the core of their testimony has never wavered. And at the heart of it all is that chilling, recurring detail. A family terrorized by something that seemed to draw its power from the clock, and an unholy appointment kept every morning at 3:15. The Amityville case anchors the idea of the witching hour to a single, terrible place. A home that was poisoned by violence and tragedy. A place of the living, invaded by the dead. But what of the places that are designed for the dead? The consecrated grounds where we lay our loved ones to rest, trusting they will find peace. Cemeteries are liminal spaces, thresholds between memory and dust, places that have a powerful energy all their own. On a night like Halloween, folklore tells us these places hum with a unique resonance. And if you were to stand among the tombstones, as the world holds its breath and the clock strikes 3, you might not be alone. Some locations are more notorious than others, their legends whispered for generations. And few are as chillingly famous as Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. It is one of the oldest and most documented haunted graveyards in the United States, investigated for decades by the famed paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren, who lived nearby. The cemetery is home to many spirits, but it is most famous for one in particular, the White Lady. Her true identity is lost to time, shrouded in local legend. Some say she was a woman named Harriet Seeley, who died giving birth and now searches for her lost child. Others believe she was a murder victim from the 1940s, her body dumped near the cemetery grounds, forever bound to the place of her final indignity. Whatever her origin, her apparition is terrifyingly consistent. She is seen as a luminous, spectral figure in a white, old-fashioned gown and bonnet, floating silently between the weathered headstones. She is most often spotted along the narrow road that runs adjacent to the cemetery, Route 59. Dozens of credible witnesses, from police officers to local residents, have reported seeing her appear in the middle of the road, forcing them to swerve. One of the most famous accounts came from a local fireman who, in the 1970s, was driving home late one night. He saw the figure in his headlights and felt a solid, jarring thud as if he had struck someone. He leapt from his truck to find nothing. Only a large, unexplained dent in his vehicle's grille. Ed Warren himself claimed to have captured the White Lady on film, a swirling, ethereal mist that formed into the distinct shape of a woman. Now, imagine being there, on Halloween, standing by the iron gates as the last vestiges of civilization fade into silence. The air grows cold. The moon hides behind a cloud, and your phone glows with the time. 3 a.m. Is this the hour when the White Lady is most likely to wander from the safety of the tombstones? Is this the moment her grief or her anger is at its peak, compelling her to step out onto that dark road, perhaps mistaking headlights for something or someone she is looking for? The legend doesn't specify an hour, but it doesn't need to. The thought alone is enough. To be in a place built for the dead, on their most celebrated night, at the hour when their world is said to be closest to our own, is to court an encounter with a legend that feels all too real. From a shared moment of terror in a secluded cabin, to a family's month-long nightmare, to a timeless legend in a haunted graveyard, these stories all orbit a single, unsettling idea: that there are moments in time and places in the world where the rules of reality seem to bend. 3 a.m. on Halloween may just be a date on a calendar and a time on a clock. The stories might be nothing more than the creations of our own primal fears, given shape by the power of suggestion and the darkness of the night. But they persist. The experiences are too numerous, too consistent, to be dismissed entirely. They suggest that perhaps, just perhaps, when we quiet our modern noisy world and listen closely in the dead of night, we might just hear something listening back. They remind us that the veil is always there, and sometimes, in the witching hour, it is thin enough to see through.